We're going to talk about it a little bit later with Jackie Gifford, but let's begin this morning in the Middle East, where time is running out for the ceasefire between the United States and Iran. It is still unclear if peace talks will even take place before it expires. In an interview this morning, President Trump said Tehran had, quote, no choice but to send a delegation to Pakistan. But yesterday, the Speaker of Iran's parliament said, quote, we do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats. And earlier this morning, Trump accused Iran of violating the ceasefire multiple times. Tehran has also accused the U.S. of violating the truce. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now to talk more about this. So, Aaron, any clarity yet from the White House on where negotiations actually stand? I mean, the president constantly says that Iran wants to make a deal, that they are going to make a deal, and then we hear something different from the Iranians.
Vlad, in terms of clarity at this moment, not really. And that CNBC interview is really emblematic of the approach and the comments that President Trump has been making in recent days when it comes to these negotiations, where he has said that he feels optimistic about a deal, that he believes the U.S. is in a strong negotiating position, but then says that the U.S. is very ready to strike Iran's power plants and bridges, its civilian infrastructure. At one point, he told CNBC that he expects to be bombing. Take a listen to his full quote here.
Well, I expect to be bombing because I think that's a better attitude to go in with, but we're ready to go. I mean, the military is raring to go.
And another sort of contradiction, President Trump said he does not want to extend the ceasefire deadline. He says, quote, we don't have much time to get a deal, and said Iran can make themselves into a strong nation again if they make a deal. But then later in the CNBC interview, he said that he does not want to be rushed by congressional Democrats pressuring him to end this conflict, saying, quote, I have all the time in the world. What we do know at this moment is that Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to leave at some point today to Islamabad with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who have been crucial in these Middle East talks, and that the deadline for a deal, according to President Trump, is now Wednesday evening Washington time, a change from the deadline being this evening.
A change indeed. The president saying, Aaron, that the military is raring to go, but consumers, they're not raring to go. They are raring for this to end. Gas is near $4 a gallon. It has been promised to be reduced to 3 gallons, so says the president, soon. How is he addressing consumers' concerns right now?
Well, even the messaging from the White House on that has been mixed. You saw in recent days Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent say that he believes that gas will get back down to $3 a gallon by the end of the summer. But then over this past weekend, the Energy Secretary Chris Wright said that that won't happen until next year due to the difficulties with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. That then caused President Trump yesterday to buck his own Energy Secretary, saying that that is not true and that the price will go down as soon as the conflict ends, though that date remains unclear. But it's clear that there is political pressure building for President Trump, and that's shown itself in the polling, especially as the national average for a gallon of gas is about $4.02, which is over $1 more than when this conflict began.
All right. Go ahead, Matt.
Aaron, thank you very much. A murky picture indeed out of Washington, D.C. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab has more on the uncertainty around the peace talks from Islamabad.
Well, here in Islamabad, the question everyone is asking is, will they or won't they? Will Iranian negotiators meet the U.S. delegation led by Vice President J.D. Vance, the same teams that just over a week ago spent 21 hours in marathon talks at a luxury hotel here in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad? Of course, historic talks, the first time we've seen such senior U.S. and Iranian officials sit face to face with each other in, frankly, nearly half a century. And are they going to walk away without a deal like we saw last time? Now, behind the scenes, sources tell us Iranian negotiators are under intense pressure from hardliners at home who say no direct talks until the U.S. lifts its blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Even if these two sides do sit down, there are major gaps over Iran's nuclear program, its proxies in the region, and sanctions relief. Now, the stakes are incredibly high. The 2-week Pakistani brokered ceasefire is nearly up, and President Trump insists that the U.S. blockade will remain until there's a deal. So how likely are these talks to happen and succeed? Well, I've been asking around, and there does seem to be an element of optimism here in Pakistan. It's describing it as cautious optimism, but the reality reality is that both Iran and the U.S. have some pretty maximalist position, not least on the nuclear program and not least on the Strait of Hormuz. How these sides overcome it, seeing each other, it's hard to say. But the fact that they are looking like they will talk again is a pretty encouraging sign for all involved. Back to you.
All right, Imtiaz, thank you very much. For more on this, I want to bring in Mark Cancian. He's a retired Marine Corps colonel and senior advisor with the CSIS, Defense and Security Department. Mark, always good to see you. So let's talk about the troops in the region. Presumably they are mission ready and alert, but what is happening in the theater and what has been happening in the theater since the ceasefire began?
Well, the troops have been resting. They've been maintaining their equipment and resupplying themselves. No doubt they're ready to go if the president should order airstrikes or even something in the Strait. The Navy has now accumulated enough naval strength that it could launch a major combat operation to open the Strait. If the president ordered that, that would be risky and there would be casualties. But they now have enough forces there that they could do that.
Is there a concern that, hey, this is Matt, Mark, is there a concern that if the United States begins military re-engagement with Iran, that it'll be something that will be hard to put back in the bottle, right? You can't plan for certain uncertainties, right? If Iran strikes the ports in the Persian Gulf, if it strikes oil fields or gas facilities, how does that affect the rest of the war? And is that a concern?
Well, it is a concern. Now, the good news is that the air defenses, missile defenses were pretty good when the war was going on. In the early days, the Iranians launched hundreds and hundreds of missiles. Those attacks tapered off by about 90%, but they still have a lot left. There would be some damage to oil facilities, but the defenses are pretty good. The risks, of course, are that the damage might take a while to repair, and also what it might do to the Gulf states and their willingness to continue the struggle.
Let me ask you, Mark, about the president has, in many interviews that he's given, suggested bombing civilian targets, bridges, civilian infrastructure. Can you remind me, us, our audience, what the rules of engagement around civilian targets are, what the legalities are when it comes to the Geneva Convention?
Well, this is very murky, and you get arguments on both sides. On the one hand, attacks on particularly the electrical system would cause great suffering by the Iranian people. Many people argue that that would be illegal. On the other hand, the United States has attacked electrical systems frequently in the past, Second World War, for example, and then in Korea also. The question is whether it would be helpful. The Iranians have shown that they're willing to endure whatever the United States is doing in terms of bombing. So it might not get the effect that the president is looking for.
You know, Mark, you just mentioned that endurance by the Iranian people. They have shown in a remarkable capacity to endure a significant amount of pain being inflicted on the country by the U.S., specifically the IRGC, which is essentially the Republican Guard that controls the country. Is there a perception in military circles at this point that Iran's strategy appears to be paying off, whereas the U.S. tactics were successful, but its strategy has not been working?
Well, this is an irony that militarily, most of U.S. operations have been quite successful. We've, of course, beaten down their air defenses, are bombing the country. We've destroyed their Navy, destroyed their Air Force. Our missile and air defenses were pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. But the United States has not been able to translate that military success into political and diplomatic success.
All right, Mark Cancian for us this morning. Mark, always great to have you, your perspective. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.